Welcome to The Authentic Spiritual Journey, a weekly podcast featuring real and practical spiritual conversations from diverse perspectives here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Today, episode 196, Finding Spiritual Meaning in Alzheimer's. And now your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Good morning and welcome to The Authentic Spiritual Journey. My name is Cynthia Alice Anderson. I'm the host, and I am also known as RCA, baby. It's a great day. It's a beautiful day to be alive. The weather is sunny and gorgeous, and I'm here in 818 Studios with my producer.
Good morning, everybody. This is Dave Croft. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 196 of The Authentic Spiritual Journey. As always, I hope that you are doing well. Hope you had a stellar weekend and welcome you to a brand new week. It is officially spring, right? March 20th is the start of spring.
I think it is, okay. Yeah.
Oh, the seasons are such a blur. I'm ready for it. I'm here for it. Of course, it's been, it's Florida. It's been warm for a while.
I know. Well, you know what I was just thinking, Dave? If we're at 196, that means our in-person recording is coming up on episode 200. So by next week, we should have official information about being in person for a recording for our 200th episode. And that's pretty exciting. We're going to be in downtown Orlando. So we'll have lots of info about that coming up.
Yeah, really excited. We actually wanted to do that for our 100th episode, if you'll remember. We wanted to do a whole live thing, and then COVID. And so I remember our 100th episode going out into the park with our live rig.
Mm-hmm, and that was really nice too.
That was really special. And I think that was like one of the first times I had gone out right after the lockdown. Like, right? I remember I was so scared and had my mask and everything. And that was special in its own way. But global pandemic notwithstanding, we should be able to have a live show for episode 200. We're just ironing out the details on the when and where, and you will be invited not only to attend live in person if you're in the Orlando area, but to be able to attend remotely as well, so that we will have access and you can join us and say hello live. So that's coming up. Can't wait. I'm rubbing my hands.
I know that's well, it's going to be fun. I think one of the things about the podcast, people feel so connected to us and to our stories. And, when people have met you and I together, Dave, if we've gone out and done an event or, a different kind of gig, and they're like, oh, I know your voices,
right.
It happened to me. This is a few years ago now, but I went to this place called the Salt Room. I love the Salt Room. It's really great for allergies and stuff. Well, anyway, I walked in and I had said something, and there was a woman there working, at the desk, and she turned around and she goes, I know this is so weird, but I just have to tell you, I know your voice. I said, well, it is distinctive. Anyway.
Yeah, I've gotten that as well. I remember my first Sunday visiting Unity North Tampa, and they're like, oh, I know your voice and I know your glasses.
Yes.
And so that was really special.
It is. And boy, there are some special people at Unity North Tampa, I must say. So this is a great day. I don't know if the word is excited, but maybe because I have a lot of energy around, the topic for today, a lot of thoughtfulness and a lot of experience. So Dave, give us our title for today, if you will.
Today we are talking about finding spirituality in Alzheimer's. Finding spirituality in Alzheimer's, which I know for you is a very, very, very personal topic.
Yes. And for anyone touched by it, it is very, very personal. I wanted to talk about this because, especially, not only because of my experience, but because of my experience supporting other people on this journey. And there seems to be an idea. So it's like before we can ever even get to this topic, it's like we have to back up and say, as spiritual beings on this journey, there seems to be a belief that if I'm on the journey, it means everything in life goes grand. I'm in this kind of what's the utopia? Yeah, this utopian experience that life goes on. I'm comforted. I'm supported. I'm lifted up at every turn, and I have no health challenge. And if I do have a health challenge, or if I do miss a bill, or that I can't pay, or if I lose my job, that suddenly we're not spiritual creatures somehow. And so I think it's important to really understand that the reason it's called a journey is it is up and down. The reason it's called a journey is there are twists and turns. Dave and I, before we got on live to record, we were talking about what it's like to drive in Orlando. And so there's detours, there's construction. Yes. That's what, and so if you're going to go, the joke here, if you're going to go any distance on I-4 is basically take a gallon of water and snacks, it's become like living in LA in terms of the time it takes to get from point A to point B. And so having said all that, what does a journey involve? Well, unexpected twists and turns. And so I want to just help give you context for, it doesn't mean you're doing life wrong if life happens. Right. So what am I saying when I'm saying life happens? Things you don't expect, things that require you to grow. It often happens that it's, we start to move into our spirituality when, life is something major has happened and it really gets our attention. It could be a divorce or a breakup or a loss of job or a loss of health or a diagnosis that scares us. And suddenly we go, oh my God, it's like we wake up and go, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And then we start to move on the spiritual journey. Then we learn we're co-creators. We go, oh my gosh, really? I can help decide the course of my life. Yes, in fact, you can. But as you're saying you're a co-creator, I don't want you to confuse that with being a co-controller. Okay? Co-creator is not a co-controller. Now, in some way, people often say, well, I know I called this into my existence. Well, yes, on some level. I believe that before we come here, we do have a soul agreement with the things we will experience because of being a soul in evolution. We agree to this body, this lifetime, and these experiences before we ever get here. And so, and we agree to that because when we're in all love, all good, the heavenly realm, we can see from the highest perspective that our soul needs these experiences to grow and learn. So I'm just letting that sink in for a moment. For some of us, this is hard to believe. Remember that you are a soul. And I just did a message on this, so you'll hear it come into the feed about live your soul, not your role. All right? So you are a soul, and the scriptures say you are spirit, soul, and body. That's from 1 Thessalonians 5:23. You are spirit, soul, and body. And we know the scriptures say, love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. So in other words, there is an aspect of you that has always been. And so if you grew up in what I will call fundamental Christianity, which of course is it's often Assembly of God, Baptist, Presbyterian, these concepts are foreign to you. But if you do a little research, which I have done, we discover that at the time of Jesus, in the place Jesus would have been, there was really a crossroads of learning and culture, and the idea that we're eternal souls would have been a common belief. So having said all of this, what does this have to do with finding spirituality or spiritual meaning, in Alzheimer's? Well, when someone in your family gets Alzheimer's, it changes the entire family dynamic almost immediately. Because suddenly you are putting together that what you've been seeing over time that you thought was, well, maybe they just weren't paying attention, whatever. Suddenly you discover, oh my goodness, I am going to now be this family member's caretaker. And it can cause you to question your faith, your belief, your, even that there's a God at all. It really is a crisis of faith, or can be a crisis of faith when somebody you love gets Alzheimer's. Because you know that you're going to watch them diminish day by day. It's a heartbreaking disease to live with. And, there is medication, now that helps some, but in general, it's a degenerative disease. And so most families, are not set up in any way to deal with it. And so, when it happens, rather than thinking we've done it wrong or where is God, I'm telling you, we all are going to have things that happen. And our work as souls on the journey is to find the spirituality, to find the lesson in the midst of this hardship and face it, with faith, with love, with seeking divine wisdom and understanding for how to navigate through it. So let me just say a little bit about my experiences in general, overview, and I want to talk to you about some of the people I've worked with and some of the blessings of it. And so when I was about 10 years old, we noticed that my grandmother was, beginning to forget things. And this was the grandmother that taught me to read and write Cherokee. She taught me a lot about respecting the earth, and I would go stay with her, pretty regularly. She lived in one of those retirement apartments. It was called Epworth Towers, run by the Methodists. And she was the queen of the party. I mean, she created events, parties. She was, my grandmother was wild. She, at 80 years old, she took all these retirement people to Hawaii. So she was a blast, she always had a lot of fun. She was always, full of joy and laughter. And anyway, she was a big game player. I mean, I always had a blast with her. Lots of laughs, lots of fun. So at 81, she moved in with us. And I think I was 11 then. And it became apparent that it was really dangerous, for her to live on her own. And this is what every family is faced with when they deal with Alzheimer's, because if it's not somebody who's in the house with you, you have to make the decision, what are we going to do? Like if you're a child and it's your parent, you have to decide who is going to take care of mom or who is going to take care of dad. And that in and of itself is a crisis of faith. Because it's like, you sit there and go, well, wait, they're supposed to take care of me. And now I have to take care of them. And we have a whole generation now of people taking care of their parents or living with their parents. I know, Dave, you're in that right now.
Yeah, that's right. We brought Larry and Judy down to live with us, partly because of health challenges, specifically with Larry's health challenges.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, and so giving them a safe place so that, we can be there. And so as it turns out, that was absolutely what needed to happen because we were there when he made his passing. So.
Yes, I was there too.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there as well.
Yep.
And yes, he had the support of you all, a community, his family to love him and support him. And it's a lot on a family. Even though he didn't have Alzheimer's, he had tremendous health challenges. So it wasn't dissimilar in that the care suddenly was upside down rather than say them saying you can move in with us if you need, the opposite happened.
Right. Yeah. And what, the really heartbreaking part about the Alzheimer's is like with Larry, it was, heart and diabetes and that kind of thing, but he was still like to the end.
Yeah.
He was still Larry. And so I know that Shannon's grandfather had Alzheimer's, and seeing him just every time we would visit, a little piece of him being gone every single time.
Yeah.
And there's been some scares with other members of the family and forgetfulness and that kind of thing. So what we're talking about today, I don't think Shannon and I are I'm trying not to just be, I don't want to sound glib about it or whatever, but I feel like this potentially might be in our future as well. So I'm definitely listening closely.
Well, this is why I'm bringing it up. It's one of the most common diseases, today. And families typically are not equipped to deal with it. And, we'll talk a little bit second half and some of the things, that happen. But I just want you to know, friends, that as life sends you these things, the goal is not to pretend everything is okay. The goal is to dig deeper in your spirituality and find, when this shows up in a family, you have to ask, okay, what is the lesson here for me? How can I support this soul? What am I being guided to do to support, this soul in a really, an interesting aspect of their journey. And of course, we never know why another soul, say, gets Alzheimer's. We can't say, well, they got Alzheimer's because of this, or they got Alzheimer's because of that, which is what a lot of very well-meaning spiritual people try to do. What we seek to do in our work here is take 100% responsibility for our own journey. And then as we do that, then, we're seeking the lesson. How can we find our spirituality in the midst of this? How do we find the spiritual meaning? And seeking guidance in what is mine to do to support this soul. So, in my history, I started to say that, my grandmother, came to live with us when I was 11, excuse me, and my mom and I cared for her until her passing. When she was 91, almost 92, and that was the beginning of my dealing with Alzheimer's. And then in my chaplaincy residency, I also worked in the Alzheimer's unit, and we had the opportunity to choose. And I was like, oh yes, I'm doing that. I know how to do that. And then later my mom also got Alzheimer's, and so she lived with several different family members. We did finally have to place her in a home for the last couple of years. It just got to the point that it was dangerous for her to be in the home. And, as hard of a decision as that was, what was so interesting is that my mom was happy to be there, and she basically worked there. When we came in one time, I'll just tell you this real quick because it's so hilarious. So my mom, I'm going to describe her to you, a very energetic, This is a woman who ran 3 to 6 miles a day. She ran half marathons. She did a triathlon at 75. I mean, So anyway, one day I walk in there and my mom is pushing another 90-year-old down the hallway in a wheelchair. And she said, "I'll be right back, honey. I got to get them to group," or something like that. And it was just so clear. And I was like, "Oh, Mom works here. Mom works here." So, what was such a difficult family decision actually brought my mom a lot of peace at that point. And so that's where the discernment, the spirituality, comes in, because, had we done it 2 years earlier, I don't think that would have been the case. She wasn't yet ready. And so see, working with our intuition, praying, meditating, getting clear, thinking through, knowing this soul so well, the right decisions at the right time are tremendous. And we know that when these situations come to us, it is because it is for the highest and best of all souls in the situation. So from our human understanding, that's hard to understand. But from the spiritual realm, it makes all the sense in the world. So we're going to talk a little more about that as we come back right after these brief messages. Welcome back, friends. We're glad you're with us. And, everything I'm talking about, I hope you're relating to it, even if you're not living with somebody with Alzheimer's. So many health challenges can be related to the same thing, the same spiritual lessons. I wanted to focus specifically today about living with Alzheimer's. One, because it's my own experience. Two, because I'm working with several individuals right now who are dealing with this, and I want them to feel supported. And I think when you're dealing with something like Alzheimer's, you feel very alone because nobody around seems to understand what you're going through. And I have this real desire to have people feel supported, especially with the pandemic. It's been even another level of isolation and feeling alone. I've certainly had some moments of that in the last few months, even though I've done, I love my work. I love my life. I have an amazing home. I love my kid. I have felt isolated at times, and a little lonely. So I know when you add a stressor like living with Alzheimer's onto that, it can really, make you question. So I just want you to know, you're not alone in this. You're not alone. I wanted to share a dear friend, who I've known for many years, probably a decade, very recently had to place her spouse in in a home because he has Alzheimer's. And several months ago, she said, "I've just been looking for the spiritual lesson." And I said, "Good." And she said, "I always let him do everything, and I realized this may be his gift to me, because I needed to learn to do things. I needed to learn to care for him." And I thought, the wisdom in that. She was not blaming God. She was not blaming him. She loves him so much that she doesn't see it as a curse, or, of course it's hard. Of course there are times she gets mad. This happens to all of us. There's times of confusion. So one of the keys, friends, in finding meaning and certainly spiritual meaning in all of this too is, I want to encourage you to make time for yourself. It's almost impossible when you're dealing with somebody with Alzheimer's, because you feel like you're on high alert. Like, I'll give you a couple for instances. So when I was little, and my grandmother lived with us, there were several of us. There was my mom, there was my dad, and I had two brothers, that were still in the home, and myself. Well, my brothers were older and they were more doing their own thing. So my mom and I mostly cared for my grandmother. But because my grandmother, I told you, had been kind of wild and pretty active as well, she was a walker. And so she would just leave the house. Now, luckily, we lived at the end of a very long hill, and it took a while to get up the hill because she was, in her 80s, and she even had arthritis, but it did not slow her down in the slightest. I'm laughing now because it was scary then, but, we'd be sitting there watching TV or just hanging out the way families do. And all of a sudden somebody would say, "Where's Granny?" And we'd have to go searching all around the house. And one day we couldn't find her anywhere. I said, "My God, I'm going to jump in the car and see if she's up the road." So anyway, there she was, charging up the road, just pumping those arms. And she had on her little bonnet, that was handmade. I mean, she was something else. And so I rolled down the window and I go, "Hey, Granny, you want to get in the car?" She said, No, I'm going to town." I said, "Oh, yeah?" I said, "What you going to do when you get there?" "I'm going to take the trolley." I said, "Okay." "You don't want to get in the car?" "Nope." And I thought, my God, how am I going to do this? So I waited a couple minutes, let her go a few steps, and I pull up and I pull up to her, a second time, and I roll down the window and I go, "Whoop, whoop, trolley, picking you up, ready to take you to town." She got right in. She got right in. And we had a joyful time. I, just went up the road, turned around, took her back home. She was happy. So with Alzheimer's, what a lot of us do is fight what's happening with them, when we fight their reality. And one of the keys and one of the spiritual teachings really is to join them, to join them in their reality for a little bit. You have to, rather than fight their questions, you have to learn to flow with whatever is happening.
Yeah, we've noticed that, with some family members, excuse me, feeling forgetful and, "No, we've already told you, Dave doesn't like watermelon or whatever, And so I've kind of just embraced exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah,
even
you
if
say
it's
thank you so much.
even if it's the 200th time you've had to remind them of something, and I think that frustration comes from almost the denial, of kind of acknowledging what potentially could be happening. But it's tough.
It is. And spiritually, it really requires you to be in the moment, because people who have Alzheimer's, they're not in the past usually, and they're definitely not, they're not in the future. Sometimes they can still access the past, but they usually have no short-term memory. And the thing they access last, on their journey is the past. But often, like with married couples, if one in the couple has Alzheimer's, they'll look at their spouse and say, "What are you doing here? Where's my girlfriend?" or "Where's my boyfriend?" I mean, and for a spouse who's been with somebody 30 years, 40 years, they immediately start crying. It's like, oh my God, Now, 10 minutes later, they'll say, "Thank you for taking care of me," and have a totally lucid moment. And so both the person in Alzheimer's and the person caring for the person with Alzheimer's, the caretaker, have to be able to, as much as possible, stay in the moment. Still also always discerning, how can I keep this person safe? So it's largely a discernment process that happens on the fly all the time. You can't leave out a knife. You can't, you can't leave doors unlocked. You can't. And, you can't expect them to remember anything you said 15 minutes ago. So it brings you into the moment. And what I noticed in my mom's journey, most definitely, more differently than my grandmother's, and it could have just been because I was younger, but my mom was so in the moment, and had so much joy at the end of her life. that it was a gift to be with her. It was a gift to be in her energy, in her connection. And at the very end, like in the last year, she kept saying, where's Mike? Or, oh, hey, Mike. She'd start talking to him, and people would say, oh, no, I'm not Mike. I'm Greg. I'm not Mike. I'm, John, my brother-in-law, excuse me, who was really amazing with her, would say, no, I'm not Mike. So one day I was visiting her in Georgia, and we took her out. There's this little area we used to sit outside, and I'd take Josh and he'd read to her, play violin or whatever. But anyway, we were sitting out there, and she said something about, oh yeah, Mike's here. And I said, oh yeah. I said, Archangel Michael? And she said, well, of course. I said, I know that you see things I don't see. And she said, yes. And that was that. No other mention of Mike. It was like, somebody, for God's sakes, get this right, We were all fighting what she said. And it's like, well, who is this? She's obviously seeing something.
And I like how they were on first name basis. Not only that, Mike. But colloquial, Mike,
Yeah. What's wrong with you? You know what I mean? He's right here,
buddy Mike. We're going to go get hot dogs later, right?
Yeah. And so, being in the moment is one of the greatest spiritual practices I know. It's what we all try to do, right? Stay present. Well, when you're dealing with that, you can't be off in the past or off in the future. You've got to be awake, aware, and present. And, when it seems as if your care is not enough, then that discernment piece has to always be there and come in strongly in terms of getting them the right and proper care, because to have them hurt themselves or you would be a tragedy, because they don't have the mental capacity to make decisions. Like there was somebody I was working with years ago, whose husband was really into had a lot of firearms and weapons in the house. I said, you have to take everything out of the house right now. You cannot wait. He will go, he will load, he will shoot. That's who he is. You grow up in the South, you grow up around guns. Well, you have somebody with Alzheimer's in the house? No more. Doesn't matter how much you like them or how much you think they're locked up. People with Alzheimer's have like this weird way of getting into places. It's like, how in the world, did you do that? And their take on reality is so different that you can't think about them and the home the way you used to. It's like Spirit says, you have to change your thinking right now. So that's what I mean. It requires you to change, to live with somebody with Alzheimer's. It requires you to think differently, to be present, to discern, to support. And in many ways, it requires you at times to completely forget yourself, which can also be a blessing in disguise. You don't have anything to worry about but the other person. Because you're wanting to keep them safe, you're wanting to help them on the journey, you're wanting to make sure they get their needs met. Even when my mom actually had a broken hip and we didn't know it, because she was still moving around. And then finally one day she couldn't get up out of the chair and we realized her hip was broken. I mean, after the surgery, I said to them, you are going to have to medicate her or she will try to get up. I said, so I don't care what you do with anybody else. She has Alzheimer's and she will try to get up. Nothing you tell her will go in. I am telling you. We have her sedated. I said, you don't understand who you're dealing with. This is not a normal human. She is on overdrive. I said, I am telling you. I said to the nurse, I'm sure you've dealt with this before, but please hear me. Okay. Later that day, I go to the hospital. I say, how'd it go? She tried to get up. I said, yep.
I told you.
I said, imagine. So but because I made such a stink about it, they put her on one of those bed that alarms when they start to move. And then they moved her right by the nurse's station. I said, somebody has got to watch her. I don't care. Even if she's medicated, she is strong as an ox. And they did. And they did a great job managing her after that initial little, and and they were like, thank you for telling me. We'll make sure. We'll watch her. I said, okay. Like all the time. Like all the time. So this is what I mean. Then, when I had to do that, I wasn't really a minister or a daughter. I was a caretaker who knew what she needed. Mm-hmm. You see, so I just had to take on, and I had to be kind of a badass about it. Like, no, I know you know what you're doing, and I just had to be a fierce advocate.
Yeah. Well, and we've benefited from that. When Larry was making his passing, you were of great comfort for us in the hospital and really helped, because we had to make some end of life decisions, on his behalf, and things were moving very glacially slow.
Yes, they were. I was really disappointed at the hospital stuff. Yeah.
So we have personally benefited from RCA badass.
Yeah.
Like
from the accuracy.
We're going to take care of this.
Right. Actually, I have a playlist I'll have to put in the show notes called Spiritual Badass. I'm not sure. Hopefully it's not explicit. I'll see. But every now and then I have to remind myself sometimes to be innately spiritual is to be fierce, And so especially when it comes to protecting loved ones, it's like Mama Bear's got to take over. And the hospital staff, they work with so many patients a day. I can't expect them to know this information without me telling them. I mean, how could they possibly know?
Yeah. And
and then there's a shift change and,
Yeah, it's not them being bad at their jobs.
No,
right?
No, it's anything, just they're overwhelmed mostly.
That's right. Yeah. They're being good at their jobs because they're able and trying to handle so much.
So many. Yeah.
So coming in there, communicating with grace, but also with firmness, and that's what I think you do really well.
We did, and and I did. I mean, I didn't, I wasn't mean to anybody or anything. I just said, now,
this is how it's going to be.
Let me just. I want you to just hear this one more time. And again, my mom is so unusual. Most people her age are in the bed. And medicated all the time. And, one of my mom's issues was at times she could get sundowners and really agitated. So that also can happen. Dave, let's put something about sundowners syndrome in the, but they, so they're up at night all the time and really fidgety and busy. It's an anxiety almost. And sundowners can be really, really difficult. So, I had I've had a lot of situations with sundowners, both with patients and with family members. And so sometimes medication to calm them is just the right thing. And with my mom, one of the things that calmed her was CBD oil. We kind of had to sneak it in, but it helped calm her down in a way that some of the medications didn't always work. So, and
just a quick definition in case you're driving or you're listening. This is from WebMD, and we will have the link to this. Noticing a big change in how someone with Alzheimer acts late in the afternoon or early in the evening, which seems to be triggered by fading light. Yes,
it does. And it's called sundowners. Yep.
Yeah. We'll have a link to that in the show notes.
Yep. It's a really intense, sundowners is a really intense, aspect of, of Alzheimer's. Most definitely. So what am I saying here, friends? What I'm saying is that everything that comes to us on the journey in some way is for the good of all the souls. And when we're dealing with an illness, especially something like Alzheimer's, that is so all-encompassing, it means that there is a grand soul learning for everyone. And when my mom and I cared for her mom, it was the hardest thing I've ever done, and it's the greatest gift, too. Looking back, I learned how to be of service. I learned how to care for someone. I learned to be present. I also learned, this is going to sound funny, to duck when she got, when it got a little weird. I learned to laugh when it was just silly and weird. And I learned to join her reality and be able to just be with her in that. And that's probably one of the greatest gifts of my life. I have friends that have almost nothing and are billionaires. I have friends that are mechanics and that people who would never get their hands dirty. And I believe that's because I learned to be present with all kinds of people. And my grandmother taught me that. You know, so even though it's the hardest thing I'd ever done, it was really the greatest gift of my life. To just be with her and love her and support her no matter what. And to support my mom in that way too. So asking yourself, you know, what is the lesson? How can I bring on my discernment? How can I take care of myself in the midst of this? How can I, be totally present and be a fierce advocate for this one I love? These are all spiritual learnings and lessons. And so rather than cursing the diagnosis in the situation, now you will have moments of anger, but to be able to come back from that and rise higher is going to be a tremendous gift to your soul and to your journey and to the one you're caring for. What I've noticed in every Alzheimer's situation I've been in, with patients or with family members, there are always these moments that they become lucid. And they'll just, out of nowhere, like it's been days or months since they said anything that made sense. And they'll just look at you and go, thank you. Yeah. And that'll keep you going, friends. That'll keep you going. So if, you need support, reach out. Contact the Alzheimer's Association. You may need a support group to talk to other people dealing with this. Family and friends may not be supportive, but you have to get support and don't do this alone. So as always, friends, know we love you. We bless you. We pray for you and are so grateful for your love, for your support of the show, and that you keep listening and sharing. We're so happy to be all over the world and over 80 countries, and you are a part of that. So thank you, dear friends, for blessing us, and we see all good things for you and those you love. So blessings on the journey, dear friend, and we'll see you soon.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. This channel is made possible because of listeners just like you. If you would like to support the channel with your tax-deductible contribution on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. The Authentic Spiritual Journey is copyright 2022 Cynthia Alice Anderson, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission from RR Hot Publishing. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.
Hey friends, Sean here, your Experience of the Soul producer. I want to take a moment to tell you about something truly exciting. The Soulworks online community, created by your host, Cynthia Alice Anderson, and available on the Mighty Networks app. If you're looking for a place where you can explore your spiritual path, connect with others, and grow in a meaningful way, then this is for you. Soulworks is so much more than an online community. It's a safe, inclusive space for spiritual exploration, self-discovery, and personal transformation. Inside the community, you'll find everything from uplifting spiritual studies to soul-centered growth practices, meditations, affirmations, and so much more. It's a space where you'll always be supported and never judged. The best part, membership is free. You'll have access to powerful resources, inspiring content, and a supportive group of like-minded people who are all on their own unique spiritual journeys. And if you're ready to dive deeper, there are premium options available to enhance your experience with a live Monday night talk series and extended, deeper meditations. If you're seeking a place to connect, grow, and nurture your soul, we would love to have you join us in the Soulworks community and see where this journey can take you. Visit my.soulworkscommunity.com today.